Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Julian, and I'd like to welcome you to the Adult Education Student Recruitment Action Plan Professional Development. This is brought to you today by the Professional Development Network from Adult Education, the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, and the Illinois Community College Board. We move to our next slide. So many of you have received notification that we will have 3 events to support the system. Today is our first with Understanding the Process. We will come back here next week for a gap analysis on February 24th. And then we will look at next steps for a successful submission on March 3rd. Each of these events are supported by the Professional Development Network of Adult Education, which has representatives on the call today, as well as the ICCB and the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. As we move into today, we're really going to cover today what the action plan looks like, what resources are available, and what we are doing to make sure that you have support as you move through your action plan development. With that, I want to hand the floor over to Sarah Goldammer, who will walk us through what step 1 is as we move into the action plan.
Good morning. Thank you, Amy. And yeah, this is Sarah Goldammer with the Adult Education Professional Development Network. And I have the job right now of kind of framing up where we've been and where we're going and why. And so I'll do my best to do that in a couple of slides, and then Amy will take you through the process. So a large number of you attended the Recruitment, Engagement, and Retention series that was last fall. And a shout out to the many programs who stepped up and shared their resources and what they're doing. You can see some of them on the slide there in front of you. So we appreciate that. There's a lot of great innovation going on in the state, and we want to celebrate that. We know, and ICCB knows, that we're living in some really difficult times. So we want to acknowledge that. We want to honor that before we move on. I do also want to mention that all of those recruitment, engagement, and retention series, and there was 6 of them, are all recorded, and the slides are there for you. And I believe one of my colleagues is going to put in the chat the direct link that takes you to that series, so you can take a look at it. So that's some of your homework, some of your back story, if you will, before we move on, if you want to spend the evening tonight watching all of those. So the purpose of today is to provide every support possible. Amy mentioned that, and let me reiterate that. And the reason is because we believe, and I'm pretty sure everybody on this webinar today believes, that adult education is the solutions to at least some of the issues of this pandemic. Our learners in Illinois need us to step up. And that doesn't mean that we haven't been stepping up. I just mentioned there's been a lot of innovation, a lot of engagement and recruitment that's been going on, but we want to think about today, is there anything else that we can do? What else can we do for marketing? And so Amy's going to talk about a little bit of that as we go through this process, but some of the evidence-based practices that were highlighted in the series that I already mentioned is that word-of-mouth marketing, making sure that your web page is the gateway to your program, making sure that's accessible. And there is going to be a follow-up webinar next week specifically about your web page, making sure that we use common language that our learners are going to be able to understand, especially low literacy or not native speaking individuals. We want to make sure that we are providing every opportunity for them to understand. So in framing this series, this project, we want to provide that support. We are that solution. As I mentioned, I know that there is a lot of innovation. ICCB knows that there's already a lot of innovation that's going on. But at this point, and this is my framing, is to step back and say, do we need to come around the bend again? Is there something else we need to step up and do? Is there something that a sister program or a brother program is doing that we can try as well? Or maybe it didn't work in September, but it's time to try it again. And the last part about this is, hopefully you can look at this project as a way of showing ICCB all of the many ways that you are trying to engage and recruit your students currently. Because one of the other pieces is, as we look at these slides, we want to consider how to help Illinois fulfill the federal requirements, which is extremely important because we all like to be funded. So thinking as Amy, I'm going to hand it back to Amy, but I will hopefully that I have appropriately framed up the why and the how, and now she's going to talk about the what.
Thank you, Sarah. So as we move forward, just a couple things. You do have that opportunity to post questions in the question box. We will be taking questions if we have time today, and then we will also, again, this is for us to support you as you go through this process. So there are two documents that should have been shared with you or have been shared with you. They're in the link. The links to those documents are also in the chat box now. And so we're going to walk through those together and then open the floor for questions. The first is the Adult Education Improvement Process for Recruitment. And really this is a 5-step continuous improvement process. We're looking to organize, explore, understand impact, and act. The review and reflect component of this is something that you'll be doing either moving into FY22 or on your own. But really what we want to do is help you get to that act stage where you can develop your action plan. And so as we move into that next slide, we want to talk about, let's look through the document. One of the things that's really important as we move through is we want to set SMART goals. We want to set goals that allow us to measure our information and are realistic and are able to be achievable. So the document asks us to look at what do we need to learn about effective recruitment. How will we leverage the available resources to help? What do we want to accomplish? And then we look at the do. Based on what we have learned, what is the specific action we'll be taking? Who is responsible for each of these actions? And then we go down and look at the act and the study. What strategies should we use? What do we do to improve recruitment? And what changes should we make? As we talk about the study and making sure that we're monitoring, we want to acknowledge that there's a lot of things that Sarah said. There's a lot of great things that have already been happening in the system, a lot of great things that are going on in the system. So what does that look like? What do those great things look like? And be sure that we add those into our action plan. So as we look into the next slide, this is what it looks like. One of the things we ask is that we don't do this in isolation. So I don't want just one person sitting down and looking and filling out this form. And I want to keep in mind, and I know we've said this through our recruitment and engagement series, but you can't fix a problem with the same thing that got us into this problem. So let's look at some of those new innovative strategies that we've looked at. Let's look at really thinking outside of the box. And I love and hate that term all at the same time. But if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And we have a lot of barriers that have been caused by COVID. We have a lot of barriers that exist to recruitment. So how do we kind of reformulate that? How do we look at making our front door, one of those best practices, making our front door our web page instead of our actual physical front door? So the document here, you put in your adult education program, what is the identified problem? So what problem are we going to focus on for our action plan? What is the goal that we wish to achieve? So is that increased recruitment? Is that increased students? Are we looking at some goal that will help us move toward more numbers in our programs, things of that nature? The next box there is name the team who will be addressing the identified problem. And again, we want to be sure that this is a team approach because this is a big issue, and this is an issue that should not be taken on by one person. This is an issue that should be taken on in partnership. So who are those team members who will be identifying to support that program? Then we move into the study. So what are we measuring? What's being assessed? Are we looking at our recruitment numbers? Are we looking at the stats over the last 3 years of where our numbers are? Are we looking at what kind of data are we going to review, which is that next step that the state would like you to submit? And then how will we determine progress? What are we going to say is success? So is success if we get 20 more students in? Is success if we get 5 more students in? Is success that we have an increase in completers? How are we as a program defining our success? And then are there things that need to be adjusted or modified as we've done this study? Is there new data sets that we don't have? Is there things that we want to be looking at? And so then that takes us to the next page. which is identify those action steps. This is also the opportunity where we'd like you to share what are those action steps that are currently being taken, and then how can we move those in from short-term into long-term. So let's say that you've remodeled your website. What do you think is going to be a return on that investment? You've started social media posting. What is our short-term plan for that? What is our long-term plan for that? Looking at those things, we want to identify the staff responsible for these actions in the short term and in the long term. So is there somebody identified who's going to maintain or be checking on the website? Is there an implementation of a program-wide email that will be responded to by a particular individual, or who's responsible for those things? And then we want to identify changes or modifications or improvements. So looking at what we have been doing, looking at how we're going to change, modify, and improve that. As we move through that action plan, the next step is moving into learn. What is the area for improvement in our marketing? What is the area for improvement in our recruitment strategy? And then, did you reach or accomplish your goal? If yes, one to 3 months. Term is 6 to 12 months.
Hey, Amy, excuse me,
Yes.
but we lost you for a little bit. At least I did, so I'm going to assume that others did. So could you maybe just repeat that last part about, did you reach your goal? Yes, no.
Oh, yes, I'm very sorry. I'm called in. I thought you had me.
Well, and maybe it's just me. Maybe so. If feel free to override me. Anybody else, if you all heard that, and that was just me.
Sarah, I'm happy to repeat. So, what is the area for improvement in your marketing, and then what is the area for improvement in your recruitment strategy? So, as we look at the problem, we want you to be looking at it from both the marketing standpoint and from the recruitment strategy standpoint. And then we want you to let us know if you feel that you're going to accomplish your goal, or if you're not going to accomplish your goal, we'd like you to explain that as well. The one thing I said there at the end was that short term and long term. So short term is defined as 1 to 3 months, whereas long term is 6 to 12 months. So for short term, what are you going to be doing as identifying staff and action steps and implementation strategy in the next 1 to 3 months? And then looking at those same things, action steps, staff responsibility, and implementation strategy in that long term, 6 to 12 months. The last part of the action plan is that we would like you to tell ICCB how you will address the issue. So the do part. Again, we've defined short term as 1 to 3 months and long term as 6 to 12 months. And based on what you have learned, what specific action will be taken in the short term and in the long term. So on the first part, you're talking about what you have been doing and what you're planning to do. And now we're looking at, based on what we've learned, what specific action will be taken. What changes will be implemented, and what new ideas are you planning to implement? That's that do part of the section. So I do want to pause there, and we can share that next screen with the resources on it, but I do want to pause there and allow you to take a second to put any questions in the chat. And real quickly, I'm going to walk through some of the resources that we have. So as Sarah mentioned, we have the Regional Professional Development, or the Regional Support for ICCB, is a huge resource. So reach out to your regional support individuals at ICCB. They can answer questions. They can support you. We're all in this together. The PDN, the Professional Development Network for Adult Education, is also here to support you. There are some great resources on the website. There are some great dialogue and discussion boards around recruitment and retention, and we want you to be part of that. Sarah mentioned the programs that presented in the Recruitment, Retention, and Engagement series. Great resources. If you want to pick their brains, they're available as well. And then again, the remote proctoring resources, these are done by the Central Illinois Adult Education Service Center, and we encourage you to check those out, really looking at the remote proctoring for testing. And then I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I'd like to highlight it again, is that Excellence in Adult Education website. There's a ton of promising practices that have been being put together over the last few months, and there's just some great resources there, so I do encourage you to check out that site. So are there any questions in the chat as we have moved through the process and moved through what the expectations are for the plan?
Amy, while we're looking to see if there's any questions, if I could just put my always present plug in for those promising practices, it makes me really happy whenever I see I have a new email from somebody out there in the field sharing something that they're doing, that they're finding that is successful. So please, if you have anything, continue to share those with anyone on the PDN. It doesn't just have to be me, any of us will be happy to gather those and post those on the Excellence in Adult Ed website, so that nobody should start with nothing. We all have a lot of great resources for us.
So Amy, there are a few questions. There are a few questions.
Can I really quick make one
Sure.
make one comment? To build on that, without those promising practices, we would not have been able to put together such thorough and well-developed professional development around recruitment, engagement, and retention. So when you look at those series, you're going to see that the first 15 minutes of each of those webinars is evidence-based practices, which is lovely and fantastic. But then the second part is really seeing your partner program, seeing your peers implement those strategies, implement those effective evidence-based practices. So I encourage you to take a minute or a moment to spend some time with those and see what is being recommended, not only evidence-based research, but also then hearing who's doing those great practices. Because again, we really want you to feel supported as you go through this process. Devin, now please let me know what questions there are.
Yes. Do you want a form for each action task?
I believe the requirement, from what I understand, is just the action plan is to be completed and sent into your regional support.
Okay, and can you explain the difference again between the act and the do?
Yes. So the act is really looking at what you should use, kind of that evidence, going through what's either being done currently and looking at what you would like to do to improve recruitment. And then the do is what are you actually going to be doing. So the act is looking at what has been done, what your actions currently have been. The do is what, after doing your research and looking at your evidence, what are you asking to do moving forward?
Okay.
Or not asking to do, what are you planning to do moving forward?
Okay.
So based on what you have learned, what specific actions will you take now?
Okay. Could you clarify the timeline of these plans, timing for providers to make this a collaborative process for drafting, submission date, when the short-term period starts?
At this time, I am not certain of the due date of the action plan.
Okay.
But once I learn that,
but
I
it's
will
to start
share
right now,
that.
right?
Yes, it starts immediately.
Okay. And someone said that the links are broken, Brittany. I don't know what that's about. Adrian, you can maybe address that. And the PowerPoint will be available. Yes, Amy?
Yes, PowerPoint will be on that website as well as soon as we're done here today.
Okay. And again, the question was when is it available due to the regional rep? And you just said you're not sure. So those are the only questions that I see right now.
I will have to follow up on when it is due. What I do know is that the enrollment action plan will be used to assist in identifying strategies to meet performance outcomes. That communication has gone out from regional support to each of the programs, and there's also been a letter that has gone out to the presidents as well. And so that information is with your institution, and it is my understanding that any one program whose enrollment is down more than 20% will be required to attend this professional development and then complete an enrollment action plan.
Okay, Kathy just sent in, and I don't know if everyone saw it, but the date has not been set, but she said, let's go with a week after the final webinar, but programs can develop after that. So that's what she said. And another question is, since remote learning has not previously been a part of adult ed, might the effectiveness of the recruitment strategies be impacted, and how can we counter so adult ed students feel comfortable enrolling during this period?
Can you read me the question part of that? I mean, I hear a statement there, but what is the question part of that?
Okay, it was, how can we counter the fact that we're using, I'm trying to paraphrase, that we're using remote learning so adult ed students can feel comfortable enrolling during this period of time. The effectiveness of the recruitment strategies being impacted. It's very long. Let me read the whole thing. Since remote learning
Sorry, thank you.
Since remote learning has not previously been a part of adult ed, might the effectiveness of the recruitment strategies be impacted? I'll stop with that one and then we'll go to the next one.
So it is my understanding that remote learning has been implemented for adult ed through the course of the pandemic. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So
I think, Amy, if I could just add to that, I think watching the recruitment series will really help to see, I mean, basically what the programs that have been innovating have shared is, you know, we realized very early on that we did have to do things differently for many reasons, including the one that was expressed by the person who asked this question, that you know, I mean, we have a lot of things to address in trying to do business not as usual, but in a way that we can still serve our learners. So I think that probably watching that series and seeing what some of your peers are doing and hearing what some of the research practices are will help to frame that. And I think beyond that, that's part of what we're trying to capture is the ideas that people have is how can we meet learners where they are, understanding the challenges, which are many, but saying this has gone on way too long. We can't just say we're going to wait for it to be over. We need to find ways to reach and to recruit even within this. So I think part of what the ask is to not do business as usual, but to find new ways to try and recruit your students. And as far as how do we know if that's effective or not, I think part of it, a lot of programs, what they're telling us is we tried some things and then we modified based on what we saw as progress or not progress, and we keep every day refining it. So again, those series, that was what was shared by people out in the field.
So there's another question before Kathy comes in. She wants to say something, but when we prepare the action plan, do we set targets for enrollment for the year or for each semester?
the action plan is not necessarily to set targets for enrollment. The action plan is to set targets for improvement of recruitment. So if that is the result that you want as your goal, then you can be your target for enrollment. But I think we want you to be thinking more of than just saying just numbers. We want you to look at strategies and implementing strategies and ways in which you can move from a brick and mortar front door to an online front door. And so how are we sharing out information, and is that information getting to the potential students that do exist? So I don't think that the action should be simply focused on X number of students increase. That's your goal, but how are we getting to that action? So I really encourage you to look at strategies and back to Sarah's point, listening to those webinars and hearing how your partner programs have gone through some different explorations and see where they landed to really get us to where we want to be, which is those numbers going upwards. Because at the end of the day, I want to kind of end with where we started. We have suffered because of the pandemic. There have been some barriers put in our way. However, when we look at where the state of the country is and where the state of the state is and where the state of the economy is, adult education is the solution. We have the potential to really serve those students who are either out of work or looking for work or looking to upskill. And adult education is that answer. So how do we make sure that our programs are front and center when they're looking for their personal solution, because we know that adult education is the solution to rectifying and to putting the world right side up from where the COVID turned it upside down.
Yes, and the writer of that question said that she agrees, but they need to measure if their strategies work.
So Amy, I do want to note that I added Kathy Olson-Tracy as a panelist. So Kathy, if you want to chime in at any point, you are free to unmute yourself at this point.
I believe I'm unmuted, and I do want to kind of address this, the conversation. So last night I watched one of the first presentations, town halls by President Biden, and it was very COVID specific early on in that. And a couple of things that he said struck me as our new reality. He made a comment that he would expect us to be close to a normal by next Christmas. So I think that how we're shifting our recruitment strategies has to align with this new normal that we're living in. And because it's not going to change in July or August, and we're not going to, in all likelihood, I don't have a crystal ball, in all likelihood go back to a full normal in August for fall enrollment. You know, we couple this pandemic crisis that we're in with several years prior of declining enrollment. So we need to look at system-wide a new strategy to kind of engage our learners and try to bring them in the door. So as you're looking for measurable outcomes, what we're really looking for here are strategies, and investment in strategies that are going to help you be sustainable in the future and be able to reach our students. So yes, our one goal is absolutely to increase our enrollment. But when we look at what that means, it means we're letting our students know that we're here and that we're still offering services. We can offer them, and I recognize all of the challenges that you're under right now, the challenges of virtual assessment and the scalability of that assessment, a full shift to remote learning. Everyone on this panel in this discussion recognizes all of the stressors that you've been going under, and quite honestly, the trauma that has been our world for the last year. To focus on your questions, what we're looking for is a strategy that guides you into thinking outside the box. We're looking for institutional support to the adult education programs so that your institutions can share with you. Maybe they provide you with additional marketing support. Maybe they provide, you know, what do those partnerships with your institution look like and expand on? And how do we grow from a traditional method of recruitment, which worked when it was, we were able to go into community events and have tabletop displays and public speaking engagements and things along those lines. And all of that is taken away from us. So how do we have to shift? And how do we have to get ourselves positioned so that our students know we're here? So at the end of the day, you know, I want this to be more than just a fill out the checklist and turn it in and say, okay, I've done that. I really want to start looking at how do we help you develop some of these strategies, and how do we help you move from what we've done as a field for decades and how we've recruited students. You know, flyers in local grocery stores and in churches and supermarkets are not effective if we can't go to supermarkets or churches or laundromats. You know, public speaking events are not effective because we can't do that. So how do we have to reframe this? So I'm more interested in making this a process than deliverables at this point, because right now, if the process advances, the deliverables will come. Okay. And I am going to turn this back over to the leaders of the presentation, but I just wanted to chime in and kind of give you some additional context for this. And I also want to talk to you. I've been on the phone pretty steadily since Friday when the initial letters went out. Most of the day yesterday, I've been on the phone and throughout the weekend. And I'm okay with that. You have every right to contact us and talk to us about your concerns. So I'm very okay with the concerns and the frustrations that have been expressed. So that virtual door is always open for you. But what I will also tell you is some of you are disagreeing with the data. As we stated in the letter, the data is a very fluid process, and how we got the data. A couple of very interesting things have happened over the last couple of days as people have informed me that their data is incorrect, in part because they haven't added their data to DAISY. And I will say this again and again, I make decisions based on the data that's in front of me. And if we're not regularly putting it in the system, then I'm making decisions out of bad data. So I am going to ask you to, as a part of your process, to start making sure that your data is added regularly, monthly, so that we can make informed decisions. I'm also going to say how we got that data. We used an extract. So that was a behind the scenes extract that is not tied to any of the reports that you guys draw. And what it basically said is any student tied to a classroom in FY18, FY19, FY20, and FY21. So that means that student is put in a class somewhere. And that's where that data came from. So if we have students that are not assigned to classes or not in the system, then I can't make a reasonable decision or guide our state in any variable direction when the data is not being put into the system. So, I will tell you that if you have a strong disagreement with the data, let's look at some data practices, how often it's going in the system, and then you can reach out to your regional support and we will do a little bit more clarification with that. But I am going to tell you that where we are right now is focusing on what do we need to do, because this new normal is not going to change in July. So with that, I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to turn it back over to our trainers.
Amy, there's a couple more
Kathy.
questions.
Can I just add one little part here? So today we talked a lot about the deliverable, but I do want you, and I encourage you to look at that continuous improvement plan, because before we get to where you're filling out the action plan, I encourage you to go through those steps. Organize. So each program identify a recruitment strategy to address, do an analysis of existing data on student enrollment that feeds into the initial decision of which strategy to address. So spend some time organizing, not like months, but look into the idea of what is your current situation. Program leadership will want to collaborate and focus on a critical recruitment problem, and then explore, look at the ways in which you encourage to examine college program enrollment data, comparing the data. To Kathy's point just now, if we don't have accurate data in the system, that does handicap the state in its ability to plan appropriately. So be sure your data is correct and up to date. And then understanding impact, seek to understand how key recruitment processes and practices impact student enrollment. So are there barriers that you identify? If you are simply doing what was done in 2018 in 2021, that can lead itself to a problem because the world is not the same. So I really encourage you to understand the impact of doing the same thing and expecting the same results, because the world has dramatically changed. And then act, that's where we get into the student action plan, and that's where what we talked about today and filling that out. So I do want you to spend some time with both of those documents, the continuous improvement plan, and then the action plan is your deliverable. Your action plan is something that you fill out after you've really identified, organized, explore, and understand your impact, and then you get into that action plan. So with that, I do want to let Bevan tell me what questions we have.
Is this push for FY21 or FY22, and are the expectations to have a major impact on this fiscal year?
I will let Kathy address that, but my understanding is this is to identify that there is an issue and we need to start to right the ship with strategies. So what strategies can we put forth now to increase recruitment, increase student enrollment, and start to rectify the situation? In many cases, there are a lot of things that all of these programs, I've worked with you guys, I know what you're doing some great things, and maybe we're just seeing the turn of the ship now. But if we proceed on our current trajectory, is this worry that our numbers will continue to decline. So we need to be sure we're focusing on those strategies and implementing that presence online, because if we don't, we're going to miss a lot of opportunities with students. But Kathy, do you have anything to add to that?
I will add that there is not one strategy that any program is going to be able to do in the short window of time we have for the remaining of this year that's going to snap our fingers and magically get our numbers to a point where they need to be. I recognize this is a long-term process. You know, and by long-term, I'm looking at what are these strategies and plans that we're going to do now? How are we going to start looking at recruitment in a 21st century post-pandemic world? Then we're going to start looking at how do we continue to grow this? Because the two concerns we have right now are to first stabilize our enrollment. You know, our enrollment has been going down for the last probably 10 years every year, and we are at a point where this is very, very problematic. So what do we need to do to modify our practices? And then what do you need from us? There's a place in this plan for barriers and discussions. This needs to be a discussion with us so that we can continue to provide support and grow with you. This is a process. And that's really where I want this looked at as a process to grow. We need to stabilize enrollment. And that's what I'm hoping we do right now is stabilize our enrollment and stop the rapid decline. And then we need to start building enrollment up. So the answer to that question is I don't think that by March 1st, I'm going to see 10,000 more students. And then by April 1st, I'm going to have another 10,000 students. Those are very unrealistic goals. I do hope we're at a point where we can stabilize where we are, that by the end of the year, we have solid student services, and then we can continue to build up from that. And I want to reiterate the last two things that I want to say to that question is our students need us more now than they ever have in all of adult ed history. And I don't say that lightly, but if we're looking at the impact of this pandemic, that so many of our students are going to be left behind on this economic recovery, that we know that the health literacy consequences of being uninformed about vaccination processes and what this means could very well impact everybody's wellness and safety. Our students need us more now than ever, and they need to know we're here. I've seen a level of commitment to this field that is amazing. But if we don't put the right infrastructure in place, our students can't find us. So this is really just about a conversation. These plans are a conversation so that we can see what you need, what supports are in place, what innovative ideas that you have, and where we're going. And let's stabilize enrollment right now, and then we'll worry about increasing enrollment. Does that help?
So, Kathy, there are a lot of questions that are dealing with reports generated for enrollment data by region, all the way up to looking at DAISY version 2.0,
Okay.
and those kinds of things that I think would be better addressed by ICCB or CC or something later rather than right here during this time. But I think that
yes. Let me address how that data came about, and then we'll table the data questions and move forward. And here's what the concerns are. We pulled an extract. This is not a report that you guys have access to. We worked with our data team and pulled an extract out and said, okay, tell me the number of students who were assigned to a class first day, February 1st, FY18, assigned February 1st, FY19, assigned to a class February 1st, FY20. That was the data set that we used for these numbers. They do tend to match what we have in our system statewide at this point. So I understand that there are concerns about that, but we're not looking at midterm or the T&P report. We're specifically looking at how many students were touching a program February 1st of each year. Okay, that was our benchmark, because quite honestly, what we don't have, that was our benchmark, and let's just leave it there. One of the things I will say is I'm very confident, because that wasn't pulled out strictly by our data staff. We worked with our research and policy studies, we worked with our data staff, and we worked with Kate. We did not put these numbers out there lightly. So there was a lot of time and effort put into determining what those points are and points in time. Now, I'm seeing people are telling me they don't agree with those numbers that they're seeing, but there are a lot of complexities in that. Are the numbers from your data staff actually, are the students actually entered? We know that there's sometimes delays in entering. You're looking at data as of today. What was that data as of February 1st? You know, what does that look like? So I understand your concern with this, and I understand your frustration. I have been speaking to many, many, many of you for the last 4 days, and I will talk to anybody who wants to talk to me specifically. But I will tell you that the trends in our enrollment, the decline in our enrollment, and where we are statewide number, these numbers make sense. So talk to me if you see something that is striking. Part of your plan can be that you plan on hitting what your estimated numbers are. If you want us to know where you think you're going to land, that's great. But right now, our focus is to continue to stabilize enrollment. We have got to start looking at this as a statewide problem. Our enrollment has declined from, in the last 10 years, from well over 90,000 students to last year of 49,000 students. You know, this is not an isolated issue or a program-specific issue. It is a statewide issue, and we have to start looking at it together to work and collaborate on these enrollment trends. Tell us what you need from us. In those plans, tell us what you need. Tell your regional support the support that you need. Let us know how we can help you. And let's kind of stabilize our enrollment. I'm very concerned that our statewide numbers by the end of this year will not even hit the 40,000 mark. That's a very, very frightening statement. So let's work together to kind of stabilize this and then start working on increasing it.
Amy, I have one comment that I think lends itself well to this improvement plan that you've been talking about. They're actively recruiting, and they've developed a strategic plan for that process, but their problem is getting residents to follow through and complete the process beyond completion of the application. So scheduling for assessments, et cetera, those kinds of things. If you were going to be doing a continuous improvement plan and you have a recruitment strategic plan in place, then that would be you're listing your problem or what you're doing currently and then what your problem is. Is that correct? Would that be a way to look at that?
That is correct, yes. So if they have a strategic plan already in place and they're looking at that, which I'm guessing the program that you're mentioning is not alone in that, and you're seeing that there is a barrier, so you're getting them signed up, but you're not getting them to assessment, or what are those barriers? And then let's take a little time to examine what the barriers are and what are some solutions to rectify those barriers. That's what your action plan would be. If you already have a strategic plan in place, yes, that's a perfect place to start. But I'm guessing if they do, they've seen some issues, some barriers, something has come up. Maybe it's transportation, maybe it's childcare, maybe it's accessibility of online internet, all of those things. So what are those barriers, and what are some ideas or strategies that we could use to rectify those situations? And that's where that professional development and recruitment strategies, or looking at meeting students on Facebook Live or meeting students on live Zooms or having office hours, things of that nature. We can't explain away or pretend that the world is not impacted by COVID. It absolutely is. And I think everyone on this call acknowledges that. Actually, I know everyone on this call acknowledges that and realizes that there are a lot of barriers that exist. But how do we find solutions of those barriers? Because we've been operating in this COVID world since last March. So we're basically almost at a year come March 13th. So how can we work through those? So if there is an issue with assessment, what are some areas that we can rectify assessment? And that's where those resources that Dawn's group has, I'm trying to think of the exact wording because I know she has proper wording with that, that we want to be sure we're sharing and looking at. So remote proctoring resources, what are those resources that we can look at to really find if there's effective ways to kind of look at strategies to address those barriers that have been identified in our strategic plans. Does that answer your question?
I think so. There's a lot of questions.
So what I want to do is just cap us up today and let us know where we're going at moving forward, so you know what to expect on our next call. As I mentioned, this is really walking through the continuous improvement process over the next week. So I do encourage you to organize, start exploring. When we get together on the 24th, we're going to be looking at working with programs to make sure that we have identified a problem that can be addressed and provide guidance and support for those programs that need assistance. So let's say that as you go through this, you've identified that assessment is your problem. We'll provide some resources on assessment. If you've identified that recruitment is a barrier and you're having trouble with online recruitment, what are some things that you can put or reworking of your website that can assist with that? One of the series that's coming out and the marketing will go out today for is making your website an effective recruitment tool. So it's going to be a 20-minute video that you can watch with strategies. There's a document to support those strategies, and then we're going to hold workshops in addition to that to assist programs in making their website an effective recruitment tool. So maybe that's something that you look at is, oh, my issue is our website, that it's buried somewhere in our, college's whole big website. How do we make it an effective recruitment tool? What are those steps that we can take? And then when we come back on the 3rd, we're really looking at next steps and what that successful submission looks like. We'll be working with ICCB and making sure that we know those due dates and what the follow-up will be with the regional support for that March 3rd webinar. In the meantime, if you do have questions, the Professional Development Network, ICSPS, and the regional support for ICCB are all here to answer those questions and support you and help you kind of work through what is going on, how to identify what your problem is, and then look towards strategies to address those issues.
Could you talk about when you would like the reaching your goal statement addressed?
When we would like the reaching the goal statement addressed?
Yes, Elizabeth Hobson said, talk about when you would like the reaching your goal statement addressed.
So the question is, what is the goal you wish to achieve?
She said it's on the action plan. She says it's on the action plan.
So under the first part of the action plan, we're asking what is the goal we wish to achieve, and then looking at how we'll determine progress and what needs to be adjusted and modified. And then we also talk about our action steps, what's currently being done, what staff are responsible, implementation of strategies, identifying modifications. So possibly if you've not had things online, maybe moving things on to a more online platform. Oh, did you reach your goal? If yes, explain. That's the question, Elizabeth, that you're looking at? Since I can't see, I'm going to assume that that's a yes. So basically what you're asking is, or what we're asking for is, what was the goal that you wanted to achieve? And then if you feel it is achievable, did you feel you could accomplish it? Yes, explain. And if no, explain why you feel that there are still barriers or issues with that goal.
Okay, someone
I do want to acknowledge that in anybody who has worked with continuous improvement plans, the timeline for this is extremely accelerated. Traditionally, a continuous improvement model is rolled out over a month, and this is something that we're doing within the course of a month. So it is taking into account, or the logic behind it is the idea that a lot of this work you have been doing because we've been talking about recruitment for quite some time, since at least July within the adult education space. And so the thought process was that a lot of this work had already been done, so we don't have to start at zero. For example, those who already have your recruitment strategic plans or adult education strategic plans can move those conversations forward.
Okay, are there any organizations across the state that are close to goal or exceeding goal? And if there are, what are they doing, and what could we replicate from what they are doing? So is there an intention later on to possibly share some of that? I don't know.
That's more of a question for Kathy.
So yes, there actually are programs across the state that have increased enrollment. What's really interesting, again, I think that we also have to understand we have a regional approach. Some regions had different mitigation methods than others. So we have to recognize that. I'm looking at other states that are community college based and have a significant number of CBOs as well, and what their enrollment trends are. And what I will tell you is that the programs that appear at this point to have increased enrollment, and the programs in Illinois and in other states that I've been talking to and state leaders I've been talking to, have a fully automated online registration process, and they've used website as a way to get students in there, and they're using things like search engine optimization and very sophisticated types of targeted marketing. And again, we're not in the days of adult ed when I was at a program where I could go to a local school back to school event and I would recruit my entire community, because we have boots on the ground in the field, in the community. Our world is changing, and our world is getting more sophisticated in how people are finding us. So the efforts that we're putting forward on some of these, optimizing your website, search engine optimization, Facebook, whatever those ideas are, it's because what we're finding are the programs that utilize those in a strategy, and they have a full-on strategy, are the ones that have increased enrollment. We have a program with a 23% increased enrollment this year. We have other programs that have stabilized enrollment over the last few years, and that's where their world is shifting. So, and I'm talking to Wisconsin leaders, I think it's next week, because several of their programs with increased enrollment are also programs that have automated web-based recruitment strategies. So I'm trying to get a feel for what those look like, and so that we can bring these ideas and share them to you. Again, it's a huge shift in the way our world operates, and we're trying to position everybody to be stable and be able to reach our students. What I'm hearing from students, and by the way, I had an email from Octay at the beginning of the week, because there was a student who was looking for adult ed services in Illinois, and instead of coming and finding us, they went to Octay and said, I am 54 years old, I want this education, where do I find it? So that tells me we have a little bit more work to do in our online presence, because that's how students are searching. This person found Octay, but they didn't find their local program. So I think that that's telling me our students are out there looking for us. We just have to position ourselves so they can find us.
There's a really good comment that was in the comment section that Jacqueline Lynch put in, and Amy, I think it really makes a lot of sense. It says we all make educated guesses about why students don't come, but I fear there's a real disconnect between what we think and students' reality. Once we know what students' barriers and supports are, then we can make real progress. Research says that helping students to strengthen their positive forces, supports, is more impactful than trying to alleviate negative forces, barriers. Research also says that of all the barriers, dispositional barriers are the ones that programs can have the biggest impact on. So I wanted to share that, because I really think that that's something that as we are where we are right now is to help with those students with those dispositional barriers, but also just provide and help strengthen their positive forces that they have going on and their supports that they have, more than helping them with the barriers. So, and then looking at it in the negative.
Yeah, Bevan, if I could just add to what Jacqueline, you read that Jacqueline said, I think that we can't, there's a lot of barriers that we all would love to take away and we can't. And we know that. I won't list them here, but what I think we all can do is think about what are the things that we can do to help our students now, and then maybe also to shore up for the future, that maybe the barriers are too great, that they're not going to come back right now, or they're not going to come and join us right now. But if they know that there is this program, if they know that there is this support, then we want to definitely be on the horizon. So as soon as they can, they'll be there.
Bev and Sarah, I want to thank you both for sharing that. I think it really does summarize what we, with professional development, are trying to do, and that we do need to meet the students where they are. I am noticing the time, and I think we've had a really great conversation. One of the things that I'd like to propose is that we take those questions, I understand there's quite a few of those in the question box, and we create an FAQ. We work with, to the points on Daisy, we work with CC and ICCB to get some answers out. If there are things that we can do through the PDN or with ICSPS to support you, please let us know. Please reach out to us. And I do think that just ending on that note of understanding that there are a lot of institutional barriers, but there are also those student issues that we need to be sure that we're addressing and helping with it. And maybe they don't come back right away, but we need to position ourselves well to serve them when they do, and make it clear to them that we are available and here as a support, as we want to make it clear to you as programs that the Professional Development Network is here to support you as well. So with that, did you want any closing comments, and then we can wrap it up, and we will put together an FAQ. You will also be receiving a survey, and we'd like to hear what are those questions or issues that you want to be sure that we cover in our next session together next week.
Kathy, do you have anything else you want to say before we conclude today?
No, I don't. I do want to reiterate the fact that, again, I've been on the phone almost nonstop Friday to end of day Monday, and a couple of quick ones this morning. We are available to you. I would ask, if you want to talk to me specifically, you go to regional support first, and then work with them. And then if you feel like you want to talk to me specifically, reach out to Nora and schedule an appointment. Again, I want to give you the time that you deserve to be heard. And I'll take that time, but I'd like you to work with regional support first, and then schedule a time that we can talk, so that I can actually commit that time to you and give you the time that you deserve. I know that this is a painful process. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I know that this has been a very difficult year, and on top of this difficult year, this is a very painful process. But I want to reiterate the extreme importance. This step would not have moved forward if we were not looking at some very, very frightening statewide enrollment numbers annually decreasing. And since there's not going to be a magic July 1 end of COVID, and we're going to be in this post-pandemic world, to stabilize where we are and to grow from here is what we need to focus on. I want to thank you for your time. I know that I want to recognize and I want to acknowledge that this has been a very painful week for a lot of you. It's been a very painful week on my end as well. I will support the direction that we are going, because it needs to happen to stabilize our enrollment. We want to be here for our students. They need to be able to get to us. But I do acknowledge the difficulty of the last week for everybody. And with that, I am available after you work with regional support.
I want to thank everyone for their time today. And again, any questions, let us know. We will be issuing the FAQ. We will be sending out a survey with that. The survey will definitely come within today. The FAQ might take a little bit longer, but please do let us know what you want to hear or what you need from us as you're working through this process, because we are here to support you and answer any questions or provide you with ideas for strategies to increase recruitment and retention in your program. With that, Sarah, Bevan, any other comments?
No, I think the rest, if Kathy takes and we work with ICCB to address some of the other questions, I don't know necessarily, I saw a comment that this is a punitive activity. And Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't necessarily look at this as a punitive activity. I look at this as a, this may be a lifesaver thrown to us because of the fact that our numbers have steadily decreased over the past several years. And I think that this is a, I don't know if it's punitive is the word, or rather a last ditch effort to try to get us up to where Octave expectations are of us. So Kathy, if you want to comment on that.
I will say that this may feel punitive. Again, I'm going to circle back to, it's been a very painful week for many of you and for all of us. I will circle back to the many hours and hours I've been on the phone talking to all of you. You deserve to be heard, and I will hear what you have to say. But I will also stand by this move forward and this continuing action improvement and the methods that we have to move forward. It may feel punitive, but again, we're looking at declining enrollment, and this current pandemic is one more layer to this extremely complicated world that we're living in. And if we can start having these conversations about what are we going to start doing to move into a post-pandemic world, because we need to be there. It is, yes, we need to get our numbers improved for our stakeholders. There is no doubt about that. But we also have to get our numbers improved for our students, because they need us more now than ever before. And I will stand by that statement. Our students are the ones that are the most vulnerable in this new economy. They are the ones that are probably most vulnerable to housing insecurity when rent becomes due. They're the ones who may be last in line for vaccination disparity. And one of the things that we are is one of the most powerful equalizers in life for our students. And they need us more than they've ever needed us before. And if they don't know how to find us, and they're reaching out to Octave to find programs in Illinois, and they don't know that we exist because they're not sure if we're offering programs because our traditional strategies are not effective in a 21st post-pandemic world, then we need to grow with this. If you notice that continuing improvement plan has a line for you to tell us your barriers. And I don't want to see barriers of COVID. I know COVID's a barrier. But what is it about COVID? Is it because, as one person shared with me, many of the community organizations where they housed offsite campuses are closed to them? That's a very realistic barrier. So now I can start taking these ideas together and look at a statewide plan and start helping you. But I will tell you, up until now, up until this week, not a single program in the state of Illinois has reached out to me and said, my enrollment's declining. What can I do? Do you have ideas? How can you help me? We're past the days of being passive about this. We have to move forward. So it's not punitive, but it is something we need to do to serve our students.
Okay, Amy, go ahead and wrap us up.
I was muted. I said the same thing. I said that's a good note to end on. I want to thank everyone for their time today. I want to thank Kathy for being with us today. I want to thank the Professional Development Network for your support for the programs and your support for this process as we move forward. And again, to each of you at the programs, we are here to assist you as you move through this process. Please reach out to us. We're happy to help, happy to have those conversations, happy to look at strategies with you and point you in the direction of great resources. So we are all in this together, and we want you to feel supported as you move through this process. With that, I hope you all stay warm and enjoy the snow, and maybe it will hit 1 today for all of you in the different parts of the state. Have a great afternoon. Be safe, be well, and we'll talk to you all next week.